You're good. All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. This is Wednesday, March 16th. It's a regular meeting of the Scarborough Town Council. I'm going to call this meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And can we do the roll call?
Counselor Seither?
Here.
Counselor Anderson?
Here.
Counselor Paul Johnson?
Here.
Counselor Katarina?
Here.
Counselor Hamel?
Here.
Counselor Ken Johnson?
Here.
And Chairman Clucci?
Here.
All present. Thank you.
Next up is item 4, general public comments. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak to items that are not on our agenda? If so, you can step up to the podium, just state your name and address. And Counselor Johnson is going to start the 3-minute clock. So we do have somebody in person here. Sir, would you introduce yourself?
I'm Mike Doyle. I live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire,
Thank you.
and I'm going to give you guys an update on what's been going on with my activities with the town of Scarborough. A while back, I had a freedom of access request, and it was about, 1,300 emails that I reviewed. And during the court hearing, your attorney, Mark Franco, came in and he brought, I think, Jennifer, the IT lady, Tody, and Tom Hall. And because I was a plaintiff, I went first. I called Jennifer on my direct examination. I found out some stuff I didn't know. Then Mr. Franco did cross-examination. I found out some more stuff, and I did redirect and found out even more stuff. I did that same thing with Tody. And then when I called Tom Hall to the stand, I found out that he had withheld from someplace around 1,000 emails, I think it was. And I asked for an in-camera review with the judge so she could review them to see if they qualified to be withheld. This is where the plot thickens. She ordered about a dozen of them to be given to me. Seems to be the same dozen I'd already seen. So Franco didn't comply with it. He didn't give her any of the ones that I hadn't seen. He gave her the ones I had seen. So when it showed up, I told Joyce Wheeler, the judge, I said, this is not right. And she just let it go. But this is the kind of stuff I deal with Scarborough. Hinky stuff from the judge, hinky stuff from Mark Franco, and of course, withholding information that he's supposed to provide. So this is going to be an interesting next few months, because this is 240 pages of emails and other information that I got about Scarborough that's been on my website, falmouthtoday.me. Last year, 5,021,000 hits. In 32 months on this book cover, I only had 3.8 million in 32 months. I had 5 million last year. I think the next few months, I'm going to come here on these kind of nights when there's public forum. I'm going to pick a selection of emails and other stories to read to everybody here to what was going on that you guys probably don't know about. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other members of the public that would like to enter public comment? And I'm hearing that we have one online and we have another in person. Let's go in person first.
My name is Maura Erickson. I live on the Pine Point Road. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Downs project and just offer really my 2 cents. I've been a lifelong resident of Pine Point, and I just really find it, I guess, a little confusing, like probably most people in Scarborough, from everything that I've been reading in the newspapers, things that I've gleaned from some of the council meetings and stuff that I read online. I don't know all the details about the deals and all the tax information. It does get a little convoluted for a mere commoner to decipher. But I find it a little discouraging that a couple of families can have come in and bought the land and decided to build this vision of this downtown. And essentially, in order to succeed, they need a tremendous amount of assistance, it seems like, from the town in the form of tax cuts and credits and help from the town. And it seems like maybe at the taxpayers' expense. And that really frustrates me and worries me, because I don't feel like I'm going to benefit that much from the quote unquote downtown. I've lived in Scarborough as I said, my whole life, and I've never needed a downtown. I don't think most people have the need for a downtown. And so I feel like it's not going to benefit a lot of people that already live here. And again, I just want to put that out there because again, I feel like for the vast majority of people that live in Scarborough, they're not really for it. So I just have to say that, and I'm going to keep saying it. And it worries me again that we're maybe going to get a pool at the Downs somewhere on that land and still somehow have to pay for it. But it's going to be on that property. I'm a little unsure of how that's going to work. And I would hate to think that we're going to have the Risberas rent us a pool that we're going to have to pay for, or again, I'm not sure, but I hope that doesn't really happen. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. And I believe we have somebody online who would like to comment as well. Ms. Hamel, you have the floor.
Great, thank you. Susan Hamill, and I live on Bay Street in Pine Point. And I would also like to speak about the growth that we are seeing here in Scarborough. And in particular, the recent authorization the town council gave to the town manager to draft an agreement with the Downs to giving them an exemption from the GMO for 430 housing units. I'd like to remind everyone that this town was very divided about creating the TIF and the CEA in the first place. The town council was split in its approval. It voted 4-3 in favor, and many residents spoke out against the project. The townwide survey that was just completed showed that 73% of residents identified growth as their #1 concern for Scarborough's future. The entire project is very risky to begin with. Creating a new downtown is extremely difficult. So many things need to be done just right, including the timing. There's no guarantee that this project will succeed, even if the consultant's report, even the consultant's report talked about this. These developers have no track record with projects like this. We've barely seen them build anything other than big white boxes. What makes anyone think that this new commercial center would even work? Many people will remember Portland's efforts to create a public market, but for those who don't, back around 2000, Elizabeth Noyce donated $9.9 million to build the Portland Public Market. And then she subsidized it for 7 years until finally closing it down because it could not sustain itself. That was right in downtown Portland with a much bigger consumer base. They just couldn't get it right. But the Downs boys apparently have got it all figured out, or so they say. If the Downs is allowed to build the housing units they want, as they say they need to activate the downtown, how can the town guarantee that they will follow through with the downtown? Will Scarborough require them to put up a performance bond for the cost of building the downtown? And how much would that be? 20, maybe 30, $50 million? No, this is just not going to work. This is a bad deal for Scarborough. If what we really want is space for a school and a town pool, both of which we have to pay for ourselves anyway, let's just focus on those 2 items, figure out where we want them, how big they should be, and move on. Treat the Downs like any other developer in town. Remember, the TIF and CEA are here for 30 years, not 5, not 10 years. Just because they are in a hurry to cash out doesn't mean the rest of the town is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hamel. Any other public comment? Any counselors like to respond or react to what we heard? Counselor Johnson.
I have to, I'm sorry. Definitely hear the concerns. Just want to level set some folks. There are no deals. The town manager has been given the leeway to have some further discussions with the developers, mainly on performance guarantees. It's got nothing to do with an exemption. The exemption is not before us. The exemption will not be before us for months. There's an awful lot more to learn. I've learned in life, you don't say no on a motion and you don't say yes on a motion. I'm just waiting to gather all the facts, and that's when I will make my decision as a personal counsel. There are no done deals. I know there's an awful lot of misinformation, disinformation out there, some of it intentional. We're all residents. We all live here. Best interest in the town is in my forefront of every decision I make. Not jumping the gun. Nothing is being rushed. This is nice and slow, just gathering the facts.
Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of minutes from March 2nd, 2022, the regular town council meeting, and March 9th, 2022, our special town council meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? It's unanimous. Item 6 is adjustments to the agenda. Does anybody have any adjustments to the agenda that they'd like to bring up? Okay, seeing none. I
Mr. Chair,
signed.
I did have a point of, a question, a point of information, if I may,
Sure.
on the voting process. So I have a hearing impairment,
Okay.
and I know we hop back and forth between roll call votes and a show of hands.
Mhm.
So I'd like to know clearly, what is our process going to be? And on the important vote that we had a week or so ago with the single special meeting, the single action item special meeting, there was some confusion. I was afraid that it was not recorded correctly, but I didn't hear that we were going to do a show of hands. So I would like to request that all votes be taken according to our ordinance, which, requires, I understand it, to take votes by roll call. And I know there's a different set of rules with the Board of Ed, and I'm not being critical of them, but I'm making that special request based upon my hearing issue, and also just want to make sure that we don't make any mistakes.
So I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. I have no problem calling for roll call votes from here on.
Thank you.
Going back to item 7, I signed the treasurer's warrants before the meeting today. Item 8 is the town manager's report.
Thank you,
Tom.
Mr. Chairman. Certainly, we're in full budget mode. That's really occupying a lot of my time and attention. We're at this point scheduled, and we are scheduled for a joint presentation between myself and the superintendent. It'll be a special meeting on March 30th, and then we'll undertake the process involving the Finance Committee to do the detailed budget review. So looking forward to getting that off my desk and in front of you, so we can have some open, good conversation around that. I did have the occasion to attend the school building committee meeting last night. I believe councilors Seither or Anderson will probably provide some further detail around that, but certainly pleased to be part of that conversation last night. And hopefully I contributed something and will continue to. I have had the occasion to update council about the Comfort Inn down here on Route 1. We learned about a week ago that 60 rooms of the 90 rooms are actually being occupied or used for temporary housing for all sorts. Opportunity Alliance is the agency that's helping coordinate placing folks in need of temporary housing. It's our understanding from a conversation with them that this is being funded through some COVID relief monies through the federal government, coming through Maine Housing, ultimately to Opportunity Alliance. We're still in kind of the investigation mode, just so we understand what's occurring. And this Friday, we do have a meeting with the new owner of the facility, whom we understand reached out to the state and indicated an interest or willingness to provide at least this block of rooms for this purpose. My senior staff is engaged in this. We have some experience from the Fairfield Inn experience about a year ago. One of the things that's, I think, unfortunate and we expect will be problematic is there's no support facilities or services for any of the folks there for temporary purposes. Many of these folks, truly have a need for some sort of support. So that's something that we're keenly aware of and trying to be proactive in being involved in. So as I learn more, I'll certainly report out. I guess I did learn or could confirm one piece that I think we've all been a bit suspicious of. Opportunity Alliance actually has clients placed in part of the Extended Stay America facility and Candlewood Suites as well. Again, I don't believe it's the entire facilities. And so this is a phenomenon that's happening, frankly, all over the state, particularly in Southern Maine and Greater Portland. So it's an issue that we're aware of, and we're trying to be proactive to certainly learn everything about it and to avoid any issues that may come forward. So I'll keep you abreast as I learn more. And that will include kind of what the range of options and considerations are for us as a town. At the very least, there's licenses that are involved for the lodging facility as well as food handling. Those will be coming up for annual renewal in May and June. So at the very least, those issues will be coming up. Unlike normally, where if everything's in compliance, Tony will often do the renewals at the administrative level. I think this is one where I might, I'll certainly speak to council leadership, but I think it's one that's worthy of perhaps coming to the full council just so we get clear sight into what's happening there, and perhaps we can impose additional conditions as we see appropriate. Lastly, very pleased to mention, and anyone who's following our e-newsletter has probably seen these, but with some recent promotions and also some retirements, we have some other promotion opportunities. And so on the fire side, I'm very pleased we have hired a new deputy fire chief, Kevin Duras. Kevin is someone that we're familiar with. He was a per diem firefighter paramedic for 6 or 7 years, but full-time he's been with Biddeford Fire for 18 years and their deputy chief since 2012. So he comes supremely qualified. Very pleased with what Kevin's going to bring to the table for us. And on the police side, we have promoted Sergeant Scott Vaughn to the position of lieutenant. Scott's a veteran of our department, just a stellar sergeant. We expect great things out of him in the lieutenant's rank. And most recently, Frank Plord was promoted to patrol sergeant. Frank is known to many folks. He's the longtime school resource officer. I think he'll be dearly missed in that position, but very pleased to have Frank. We think his experience, his level of maturity is going to be just terrific in that capacity. So I've always said there's nothing like a promotion for morale, and certainly that helps when people see an opportunity within an organization they've invested in to advance their career. So feeling really good about the sort of talent that we've been able to attract here and kind of nurture here, and we're starting to see the fruits of that labor. So very gratifying. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions for the town manager? Councilor Katarina.
Yeah, Mr. Hall, regarding the lodging and the temporary housing that's going on in the hotels, is it my understanding that South Portland just worked out something? And I may be put on your spot asking you that, and where I'm going with this, because can we find out what South Portland did? Because they've been dealing with this, and I know they came up with something recently, and I apologize, I haven't been on top of that. So
they did convene a meeting. They had some problematic properties. I believe they had 5 hotels that were fully engaged in this activity for most of the COVID period, as I understand. I think what they did in the end were successful with kind of the owners of these facilities. 2 of them have discontinued that use, but I think there's 3 that are still operational. And we certainly have been in touch with them. I've been in touch with my colleagues there, and the police department has talked to their folks, counterparts as well. So we've got a very good sense of what their experience has been. Ours is a bit different. This is in its infancy, and we'd like to establish some good relationships right up front. But again, our big concern is that there's no support on the ground there. And that's something we hope to work on.
okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. Next up is order number 22-001, 023, a 7 o'clock public hearing and action on the new request for a special amusement permit from Patrick O'Reilly doing business as O'Reilly's Cure located at 264 US Route 1. And this comes to us from the town clerk.
As noted on the summary page, they have held one in the past. It's just during the COVID, so they did not want to renew. So now they're seeking a new application. As noted, they're not seeking an exemption from the Good Neighbors Ordinance, and they were pretty explicit on the times and days that they were going to be utilizing this. And I believe their first function is tomorrow, and it's Don Campbell. So that's why this is before.
No
you
pressure.
tonight. No pressure. But everything is in order.
Very good. Are there any members of the public, either here or online, that would like to speak to this item? All right, seeing none, I'll close this public hearing. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Johnson?
question to Tony, please. I don't see it on the, it might be there. I'm just not seeing it. This is indoor entertainment. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, not out on the front patio?
No.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Tony, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Counselor Seither,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Paul Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Ken Johnson,
Yes.
and Chairman Clucci.
Yes,
That's unanimous. Thank you.
thank you. Next is order number 22-024, a 7 PM public hearing and first reading on the new request for a marijuana license in Main Lab from Main Lab LLC located at 71 Pleasant Hill Road for an adult marijuana products manufacturing facility and schedule final approval for Wednesday, April 6, 2022. And I believe we have Liam Gallagher, the Assistant Town Manager, with us who can help introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a request for a new license. Well, it is an existing facility, so they're pursuing a medical manufacturing license. They are currently, or they're pursuing an adult use manufacturing license. They're currently licensed as a medical manufacturer, so they are established, they have been inspected, and staff have no concerns.
Any members of the public that would like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? And seeing none, Tony, would you call the roll?
Counselor Seither,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Paul Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Ken Johnson,
Yes.
and Chairman Clucci.
Yes,
That's unanimous. Thank you.
thank you. Next is old business, order number 22-017, second reading on the new request for a marijuana license from Hamel Lab LLC located at 23 Washington Avenue for a medical marijuana products manufacturing facility and an adult marijuana products manufacturing facility. And Liam, if you're still with us, would you like to comment on this one?
Sure. This was again, this is a new facility located on Washington Ave. It is zoned appropriately, and staff inspected this prior to first reading and public hearing, and we have no concerns at this time.
With that, are there any members that would like, of the public that would like to speak to this item? And seeing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Would you call the roll, sir?
Counselor Seither,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Paul Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Ken Johnson,
Yes.
and Chairman Clucci.
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Next is new business, order number 22-025, first reading and schedule a public hearing on the proposal to repeal and replace chapter 1007, the cable TV ordinance. And this is coming out of both ordinance and from the town manager. I'm not sure, Don, would you like to introduce it or use Tom?
Yeah, I'd like to introduce it and then turn it over to Tom. I mean, this came before the ordinance committee recently, and we were impressed and somewhat stunned by the sheer size of the proposed ordinance. I think this will be possibly the longest ordinance that we'll have on the books if we approve it. So I had a number of questions at that meeting, and Tom and I talked again yesterday about it. It seems very straightforward, and it's the product of GP Cogs and several communities that collaborated to produce this. The questions I had for Tom are, number one, what's the rush? Number two, I hope this is not like a prerequisite or something that is being done for some other reason where somebody's going to be seeking a license or there's some sort of pending commercial transaction that's going to follow on the heels of this. So he's assured me no, but I'd like him to kind of go through that in detail and for us to discuss potentially as a council, the possibility of perhaps delaying or extending the duration of the first and second reading because this is coming at us so quickly. Thank you.
Councilor Hamel, perhaps you must have misunderstood me. The real express purpose of this is the acknowledgement that our existing franchise agreement is in dire need of update. And this ordinance is really the backdrop to that. So there is a means to an end. Now, having said that, if you look at the vintage of the current ordinance, it certainly doesn't comply with changes in federal and state law, massive changes in technology. And so it really needs to be modernized and to reflect the current state of the law in our society. So I do expect to come to you in the coming months, and it could be years, frankly, with a franchise agreement, and that's the end goal. So forgive me if you misunderstood me or I was not clear in that regard. But let me take a step back. We're not alone in this regard. Most main communities, this is originally Time Warner that's been sold 2 or 3 times. It's now Charter Communications, formerly Spectrum. And dare say most franchise agreements have been long expired and probably antiquated cable ordinances probably. And so in recognition of that and not knowing how to really tackle this, we said, let's pool our resources. And so we appealed to GPCOG. I think 14 communities signed on, and we, through an RFP process run through GPCOG, selected Bradley Law out of Minnesota, who's a nationwide expert in telecommunications law. And they went about the business of proposing a draft kind of a model ordinance for all of us to consider. So I suspect multiple communities in Greater Portland are going through the same conversation, kind of on the same timeline. In addition to Bradley Law's input, we did have our own town attorney review it, and the version in front of you does reflect his further recommendations to, for further compliance and consistency with Maine law, but also some stylistic changes that he thought were appropriate. So that's really the backdrop to this. In terms of timing and urgency, the delay will just, I guess, cause us a delay to get to renegotiating the terms of the franchise agreement. And it's our hope and our intent to have Bradley Law or someone else represent us collectively in those negotiations. There may be some unique differences among towns, but I think there'll be the basic framework of those agreements, like the ordinances, will be very much consistent with one another. So I'd like to be part of that ongoing consortium of conversation, I guess. But having said that, if the council needs more time, I certainly understand and respect that.
So what I'd like to do, Mr. Chair, is, and I appreciate Tom's take on this, but we also discussed very clearly the need for this to be cured in some fashion. So I'm not proposing it go back to committee, but back to ordinance. But, given the fact that it does not appear to be any sort of pressing matter on this, would it be a problem for us to push it back by a month? To give us additional time to talk with people in the community and to make sure that this is something they're comfortable with as well. There are also other questions I'd like to ask in terms of has anyone else approved this? Has any other municipality approved it, and what their experience has been and what their rationale was for doing it? But I don't want to take up time this evening, but I'd prefer is that we have a little bit more time to socialize this as a group.
So why don't we put it on the floor, and that's within our discretion.
Great.
Once it's on the floor, it's ours. We
Great.
can table it to a date uncertain,
Great.
or we could break up. No.
Great.
You want a picture based on the comments, why don't we have a separate public hearing and a second reading after that, if, something along those lines. But so I guess I'll entertain, well, first, are there any members of the public that would like to speak to this item? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And discussion. Councilor Katerina had it first, I think.
Yeah, having been a member of Ordinance and knowing the work that GPCOG does, I mean, frankly, I feel comfortable probably with what they've done. I don't have a problem though with separating, put this to a public hearing and then whatever and back it up just a bit. The only thing I don't want to do is to have this land in the middle of everything in the middle of budget season. So.
Great.
Councilor Johnson.
Tom, if you would, please, could you, in kind of simple terms, just explain what this franchise arrangement is with the town? Because I don't think that's common knowledge that,
Yeah.
we just turn on a TV and there's cable, so.
Sure. It's a bit of a history lesson, and I'm not sure how relevant the franchise agreements are in this day and age, given the fact that many consumers stream their, get their information from different sources. But back originally, cable was the one place to go. And as the title suggests, a franchise agreement is the authority, being the town council says, we will grant you the authority to provide this service to our residents under these parameters and under these conditions. And some of those conditions had to do with ensuring service at a different, certain quality and maybe consistency. Early on, many of those agreements funded the start of these, the ability to broadcast. Time Warner would actually provide the equipment and the training to get communities to be able to support their public access and government access channels. Those are the sorts of things. Again, the exclusivity is probably a bit passe, just given the fact that there's so many opportunities, streaming services and otherwise. But they do, they built out the infrastructure, they own that infrastructure in our town, and want the ability to serve customers. It's consumers' choice whether they choose to accept that service or not, and many people choose not to. So I think it's still in our best interest to govern this on behalf of our residents.
And just to follow up on that, I mean, you're right, there's a lot of variety now, but you still need the internet to get any of that, which is supplied by the cable company. So
Not exclusively, there's other
some
independent-
satellites, yeah, as long as on a cloudy day, you don't want to watch something. Yep.
That's fair enough.
All right. Thank you.
Councilor Anderson.
Yeah, so, and the communications committee, we had talked a little bit about the citizen committee for cable TV, which I think has kind of fallen to the wayside. And I kind of wondered, like, what did they really do? And then when we got this ordinance, it just made me realize, like, oh, there's a lot that goes into cable television franchise fees. So I was a little ignorant, but I just want to say, I think we do need to kind of figure out how to reignite that committee, just given that we have something like this, not before this gets moved forward, but I just think this was really an educational opportunity for me to learn a lot more about all of the different things that are really great things related to state and federal law that we want to make sure we're providing information to the public in a fair, reasonable way. So as it's written, it's a great ordinance, even though it's a very long ordinance. And, I'm okay if we want to shift how this goes through the process, but it seems pretty straightforward to me.
So what I'd like to propose is that we buy a little more time, okay? The major message coming out of an ordinance was, I don't see any reason for it not to go forward, but we thought, well, let's give it some time to cure, and then bang, it's on the agenda for this evening. So and again, I know you guys need to decide kind of what the queue is and what the flow is like, leadership, so I'm willing to defer to that. The only thing I'd say is that we haven't really given a chance to really suss this out and ask a series of questions just to kind of verify, what's the extent of homes, who still have cable TV. People are switching to streaming. I know there are other purposes. I think that that's a very, very valid topic to discuss. I just would be more comfortable with a little more time. Say, let's follow the public hearing on the 6th of April, but just push it back to the beginning of May. The first meeting in May, if we can, if that's not crowding the budget process, and just ask in the meanwhile for people to come forward with questions and concerns, and maybe we have folks from the cable TV committee come back and say now why they suddenly come back to life. We were exploring the possibility of disbanding the committee because there was no activity, and I got to give Art Dillon credit. He said, no, the people are on the committee to continue. So I have no agenda here. I have no desire to kind of stifle creativity and utility of the thing, but I think it might give us an opportunity to accomplish a couple of things and still stay relatively on schedule. And we bought some time for it to cure, not like it's a piece of hanging meat,
Okay.
So.
I mean, generally, if something comes out of committee, I'm gonna move it forward. But I don't mind spreading it out. A couple of questions, Tom. So we're collecting fees today, right? Are those at risk or we just, they're not necessarily favorable terms or what's the?
They're not at risk, but they're based on some antiquated systems. And so I think frankly, one of my goals would be to get better fees and more appropriate fees going forward. So they're not at risk, but I think there probably could be greater.
And because there's fees, you need an ordinance to be able to assess them or
Well,
charge them or?
Fees is one component of the franchise agreement.
Okay.
There's other parts of that will govern kind of the level of service, and I've seen them as detailed as saying, you must provide service on these streets that don't have service currently. I think it's fair to view this as kind of a smaller utility, and so this is kind of the council being the Public Utilities Commission, if you will. It's a way for you to govern what's happening within your community. I think the suggestion sounds fine. I would humbly suggest that I think the best way to get line of sight to this is for the council to take action in first reading. And then you could certainly delay your process at that point, as opposed to, putting it to the side. I'm not sure how you're going to get better exposure than taking action tonight.
But procedurally, I'd like to make a motion before we vote on first reading that would include a revision to push back the second reading to the first meeting in May.
So right now, the action says schedule a second reading. Schedule a public hearing. It doesn't list the date. So I think
the motion for passage should include that clarity. What date would you like the public hearing? And then that doesn't even speak to when second reading is scheduled, frankly.
so. I'm looking at April 6th for
It
a
should.
public hearing, and we can call it a public hearing only. And then based on the feedback there, we'll schedule a second reading sometime after that. That would work. Okay.
Great.
Just want a clarity point, if you may. My understanding also of a first reading is nothing but an introduction out into the public, right? So what better way to start the process to introduce it? And then we control the public hearings and the second reading and any action down forward. So I don't feel this was rushed out of committee into here. I'm glad it was on here. So it's out in the open right now. It sounds like an interesting, fascinating topic, and let's move on. Thank you.
There's nothing more exciting than 30 pages of
John, just one more
cable
point.
TV.
One more point on
Yes.
this thing about, we'll vote for the first reading and then we'll just move forward. Because that doesn't mean we're going to vote in favor of the second reading. I'm not a betting man, but I bet that very few horses, have not made it through both of those races once you vote in favor of first reading. I can think of one example in the past 3 years where that actually happened, where it didn't make it through the second reading. So just
Well, it's-
caveat.
It's everybody's right? They can vote for it or not.
I'm talking about the perception of public process and the reality of public process. Once things go in motion, and my father-in-law was very fond of saying inertia is a
Point of order,
powerful force.
can we stick to the actual thing that is on the floor, please?
Yeah, okay.
And did you have anything?
And I was gonna make a physics joke and actually refer to Mr. Johnson for him to build on that, but he just ruined my.
I'll allow
my
it physics
setup.
jokes.
You're
The
confusing,
rhythm's gone
first of
now,
all, sir,
so
you are
there's-
confusing inertia with momentum, which
Okay.
is two different things.
Okay, teacher.
It's a powerful force. Inertia.
With that, I'm going to call the vote. Tony?
Council Seither,
Can someone please state the motion?
Sure. So this is order number 22-025, first reading and schedule a public hearing for April 6th on the proposal to repeal and replace chapter 1007, the cable TV ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Council
Yes.
Seither,
Yes.
Council Anderson,
Yes.
Council Paul Johnson,
Yes.
Council Katarina,
I came back for this. Yes.
Council Hamel,
No.
Council Ken Johnson,
Yes.
and Chairman Clucci.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next is order number 22-026, first reading and schedule a public hearing and second reading on the proposed amendment to chapter 302, Council Rules and Policies Manual, subsection 203.0.e, members to the Communications Committee. And this is coming to us from the Communications Committee. Council Anderson, would you like to introduce it?
Yeah, sure. So this was actually when we were setting our goals or thinking about goals for the communications committee, things that we wanted to do differently. And it was actually an idea from the assistant town manager, where we've been talking a lot about driving engagement. And he noticed as he was looking at our charge, it didn't reference anything around engagement. It was more communication, which as it read could imply just one way. And so I think it was his suggestion that we do it, and the communications committee, we were all supportive. And then it came to us and it was very simple. It was just adding the word community engagement in a couple of places. And so even though it's a really an administrative change, I think the principle behind it was really just to reassert our commitment as a committee and as a council to really try and strive to do more back and forth engagement with the public. So that's why it's before us.
Thank you, sir. Any members of the public like to speak to this item? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And any discussion?
Yes.
Councilor Katarina.
Yeah, call me confused. The Communications Committee was actually Counselor Johnson, Ken Johnson, yeah, he's looking around here, was pretty much the pushing force behind this and doing this communications committee. I think he did a yeoman's job and we really improved communication and whatnot. I'll be quite honest that we've hired a wonderful person to do communications and community engagement for us. My concern is that we're going to be going too far as a council. We should be letting our staff people do their jobs. And I don't know. I personally don't think we need to add community engagement in there, but that's my opinion. And this is only a first reading.
Oh, no.
So I've spent a lot of time in my career around change management initiatives, for HR functions in big companies and that sort of thing. There's a series of steps. First, you try to communicate or align people behind a change, and then you engage them, actually get them to sign on to do something, and then you implement it. So words count. And I think this is actually a tribute to the work that has been done by Councillor Ken Johnson and by the entire council for a couple of years. We've really made a commitment to communications. We've added a super director. We've got a brand new website and we've just blown the doors off it. We've done a survey. So if this small thing that kind of recognizes that and encourages us to keep on that path, I think would be symbolic and also welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other discussion? Councilor Anderson.
I think just to Jean Marie's point with the excellent addition of the communications director that we have, it definitely does probably merit further conversation among the communication committee in terms of better aligning on roles and responsibilities, which I think has been something we've always kind of tried to toe the line. We're, it's town staff work. They're there to represent the town, not necessarily the council, but the purpose of the committee is really to kind of think about communication on behalf of the council, that we should take more responsibility for in terms of communication. So I do agree, though, that I think with the new director, we need to, with that role, we need to make sure that we kind of are very clear on what our responsibility is as counselors in communication and what town staff is in representing the town, which may not always be exactly the same.
Very good. So, this one, I fall asleep reading cable TV ordinances, so I struggle. This one piqued my interest this time, and I was on the communications committee. You might remember, I nominated you as chair because I feel like we've made such big progress. There's a little bit of maybe apathy or inertia, if that's the right word for it. And I think you were excited about moving things forward, and I'm always supportive of progress. I support this change. I do agree with you that I think as a committee, give us some thought about are these the right boundaries? Is it the right alignment? And come back to us if you come up with something. If not, we'll do it next year or something. So that's all that. Councilor Johnson.
An object doesn't have to be in motion to have
We're
inertia.
teaching. Thank you.
I think this is a great addition. I fully support it. Good job.
Would you call the roll, Terry?
Counselor Seider,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson.
Yes.
Counselor Paul Johnson.
Yes.
Counselor Katarina.
Yes.
Counselor Hamel.
Yes.
Counselor Ken Johnson.
Yes.
And Chairman Clucci.
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Order number 22-027, first reading and scheduled public hearing and second reading on the proposed amendment to Chapter 302A, Committees Boards Manual relating to the charge for the Community Services and Recreation Advisory Board. And this is coming to us from the Community Services and Recreation Advisory Board. And I believe we have a couple representatives here. Or do we have somebody else queued up to introduce us?
Liam, would you like to introduce? I do think we have some committee members who'd like to speak to the matter. Though.
Okay.
Sure. So Todd Souza couldn't be with us this evening. He had another competing commitment. But in brief, this is expanding the scope of the committee by 2 committee members and also adding 2 representatives from the schools to sit on as non-voting members, at least in anything consequential. So it's really looking at expanding the representation on the committee and being really deliberate and in that vision. So that's the expectation. I hope with the committee charge change, but certainly welcome any discussion.
Okay. And do you have a question, Don?
No.
Okay. Any members of the public that would like to speak to this item? We have one. Welcome.
Thank you. Art Dillon, Black Point Road. I'm the current chair of that committee. As Liam indicated, we're just trying to expand our viewpoint. We've been very fortunate. I've been on the committee for quite a few years, and we've had a pretty full committee for a very long time. And we've especially recently had more interest in the demographics wanting to participate. Much like when I started, I had young kids, and a bunch of us did. Now we don't, but we enjoy what we're doing in helping this committee. And now we have a few younger mothers that are interested as well. So we thought expanding by 2 if possible, and we thought expanding to 2 high school kids to get their perspectives. So
Thank you, sir.
that's pretty much it.
I want to say, I think you're being a little modest as well. It's my understanding that you recently won a pretty prestigious award along with our Community Services Department. Do you want to clue us into that a little bit?
Thank you.
Toot your own horn.
I received the Citizens Volunteer of the Year Award. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything that you're doing.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, can we put it on the floor now? Do I have a motion
So moved.
Second.
and discussion? Counselor Hamilton.
Yeah, this, I have to say, has followed an unusual path to get here. And I'm not sure that would be the preferred flow chart for ordinance changes, but it started first in appointments and negotiations. There were recommendations on staffing. And we're like, well, wait a minute, I think we should talk about consolidating the committee first. But I have to give a lot of credit to Todd Souza and also Jamie Fish. We're very patient, and Art, we're very patient, as well as the folks that are eager to get on the committee, to let this make its way through. That said, it kind of went from appointments to ordinance and then to rules and policies. I think we got pretty much everything. The one thing I would say, however, is that the language as it reads now is a little confusing for me still, as it relates to student representatives. And don't get me wrong, I'm in favor of having student representatives, but when we talk about them not being voting members, but then they'll vote, but the votes won't count, that's confusing to me. So I just like to clean it up, to take out the references to voting privileges, because what will happen is, unfortunately, and we have work to do in this area, is to get more disciplined with our execution of Robert's rules. And that's kind of in front of the appointments committee to figure out a way to do that. But it doesn't matter in the case of unanimous votes, but not all votes are unanimous. And then sometimes people forget exactly what rules we have and who are voting and non-voting members. So I would just, for sake of the student representatives and everybody else, I would just strike the voting privileges will be collected and recorded as 7 members, and I would strike the 2 non-binding student votes. I mean, I don't think they should be voting.
So are you offering an amendment or?
Yes.
Just a discussion that for next?
I'm
week?
offering that as an amendment.
I
just
second
for-
the amendment.
Should we, is everybody clear on what the amendment is?
Discussion on the amendment now?
Discussion on the
We are,
amendment.
yeah.
Can you state the amendment?
So,
Here,
no.
I'll pull it up. Don, I'm gonna pull it up, so.
Yeah, and my apologies. We should have caught this before this stage, and I really hate doing this stuff live. But I went back and forth over my notes and reading in the last version, it's like, that's still not right. And I believe it could be confusing and it really won't help the student reps or the body deliberate potentially if we're confused about that.
I believe, Don, you're asking to strike that language.
Yes, yes.
So what's the role
Because you
of,
talk about 7 voting members in the first sentence, you talk about giving increase from 5 to 7 voting members and 2 alternate members
Your mic.
at large, and then you're going
Your-
to
your
add
mic
2
done.
student reps. Sorry, the first sentence is fine. I just think it's that part that where you start talking about the voting privileges and then you pull the student reps back in again. I just think that it's just, Counselor Johnson has it correct. I think if you just delete that highlighted section, we're golden, provided that
I-
doesn't insult anybody.
I
Counselor.
read that as, so you've got the votes of the members,
Yep.
which count, but then you've got the students making an opinion, and that's being recorded, but not counted. Because you've got them on there in an advisory role, I guess, is the way to do it. That's how I look at that language, but who am I?
But I think that could be handled in committee, but if you start introducing voting, but it doesn't really count, it's just confusing procedurally. Now, it may work for the BOE, but it's not a practice we have. Again, I really am not picking on the BOE here or on students. I was a student once, hard to believe.
Counselor Johnson. And then
I actually
Tyler.
think this is very important. The BOE has been turned around a few times with voting student members. So I'm going to make an amendment to the amendment just because this is going to go so well. I would like to add when it says 2 student representatives, I would like to add the language 2 non-voting student representatives. And then I would strike all of that language. And then it clearly states that the students are non-voting.
Okay.
And then all that language I just highlighted gets eliminated.
Yep.
And we're done.
I will second Counselor Johnson's secondary amendment.
And I will third it.
You can tell, it had to be a teacher
I'm
correcting
getting
the old
over my
guy. It
skiddings
had to be.
here. So we're amending the amendment.
Let's call a vote on
What-
Dawn's first
Why
amendment.
don't we vote down the first amendment and then reintroduce it? Okay. So Tony, would you call the roll on the amendment to the main
Dawn's
motion?
amendment. There.
Counselor Seither,
No.
Counselor Anderson,
No.
Counselor Paul Johnson,
No.
Counselor Katarina,
No,
Counselor Hamel.
Yes. I can't vote against my own amendment, sorry.
Counselor Ken Johnson,
No.
Chairman Pucci.
No. And I know how hard it is to sit in that first seat, right? Just for this. So thank you for voting the way you did.
You're welcome.
Counselor Johnson.
I would like to offer up an amendment that we insert the words between where it says and 2 students. I would like to add the language and 2 non-voting student representatives. And I would like to strike the language I have highlighted in gray.
Very good. Do I have a second?
second. Oh,
And discussion on the amendment.
voted.
Counselor Johnson.
I'm not going to make this confusing. I'm going to go with that. But I actually think it's important that a student consider the body and cast a vote, whether it's counted or not. It's actually part of the civic engagement. It's a learning experience. They know it's not going to be counted. It can sway. You are showing your opinion, even though it doesn't count. And I think it can sway, similar to what happens sometimes at the BOE. So I'm not quite sure what to do with this now. I'm not going to offer an amendment to the amendment to the amendment. Just wanted to express an opinion. Thank you.
So we're going to vote on the amendment before we proceed. Any other discussion? Counselor Seither.
I agree with Counselor Johnson. I think that if you have student representatives sitting on an advisory board, that calling them non-voting members kind of diminishes their role on the board, and they're giving their time in the same way that the other volunteers are. I understand it would, I'm more comfortable with the language around a non-binding vote. And so for those reasons, I don't particularly like the amendment.
So can we vote on that?
We're going to vote on the amendment as soon as we're done discussion. You want discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but if we make this change, this will be the first time that we have voting student representatives on a town council committee. Is that correct?
I do not know that for sure.
On a town council committee.
That's not what the amendment is.
Right.
The amendment's eliminating.
I know, but if we're,
I'm not
the
aware.
So if it
last
fails-
commentary was to go back, commentary from, if I understood this correctly.
So we're gonna
we're gonna
vote
vote
on
it.
the amendment,
Fine.
and then we'll go back to the main motion if it fails or
Okay.
passes. Counselor Johnson.
To Counselor Seiler's concern, I think that's at the sole discretion of the chair. I think the chair can absolutely ask the students to raise their hand in favor or against any of this. I think as far as the charge of the committee is concerned, they're non-voting. But that doesn't mean that the chair of the committee cannot ask them to vote. If
Thank
I
you.
was chairing this committee, if I was Art Dillon, I would take their vote.
Right.
But when it comes to recording the minutes and the actual outcome of this committee, they're non-voting. Should they raise their hand? They should. But as far as the nitty-gritty, I think it's right to call them non-voting. They could serve on this committee for their whole student career and not know that they're non-voting, so to speak, the way this language states it. I just think the language is clearer.
I'm not confused. The way it came to us, they're non-voting members, right?
Yeah.
We're just clarifying the language.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. I think they should be able to vote. I mean, I trust my kids' vote probably more than mine. They're going to give it more research and thought than I think most people, but I'm not going to fight that. I think this is clarifying language consistent with the original intent. So I will support the amendment. Any other discussion on the amendment? Counselor
Can
Anderson?
we just do a point of information? Can we align on when there is a committee charge change? What is the process? Because I remember we updated rules and policy charge to be clear that they are the body responsible for reviewing these and bringing them forward. I think what we're experiencing tonight is a little bit the fact that this is hot potatoed across the board, right? And so, I just want to make sure we're clear going forward, and for the public and for the committee chairs and everybody, the process should be when it's submitted, rules and policies ultimately does the review and brings it forward to the
It
council.
came to rules and policy.
Eventually,
Yes.
Yeah.
That is by ordinance, that's our process. As it goes to rules and policies before coming to council. There's some other nuances where all we're really doing here is amending a book, right? It doesn't actually reach back to the actual, originating charge. So we might need to clarify that this book is now where all the, these committees get their authority from. I don't know how we'll do that. We can talk about that another time, but yeah, I think the process is clear. It goes to rules and policy and then is brought forward to the council. It's clear now.
yeah.
So when does it go to ordinance then?
These do not go to ordinance. These go to 302A and the 100s and 302 go to rules and policy.
Well, I am pleased that I've had the opportunity to see this 2 times on 2 different committees. even though
And
it's
you were
not
at the rules and
required.
policy meeting, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But I will have to have more discussion about rules and policies to the council in one move.
No, we
So,
won't.
Well, there you go. You
Anyway,
guys can talk about that.
for another
I'm gonna
day.
lose track.
For another day.
Let's please vote on the amendment to the main motion. And Tony, would you call the roll?
Yes. Counselor Seiler,
No.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Paul Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel.
Yes.
Counselor Ken Johnson
Yes.
and Chairman Clucci.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
And now we're back to the main motion. Any further discussion?
Mm-mm.
Would you call the roll?
Counselor Seiler,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Paul Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Ken Johnson,
Yes.
and Chairman Clucci.
You bet.
Thank you. That's unanimous.
It's obviously a full.
Thank you for coming, Art.
It is a full moon this week. I just thought I'd point that out.
Thank you. I
And it's just-
appreciate that. Order number 22-028 is first reading and scheduled a public hearing and second reading on the proposed amendment to chapter 302A, Committees Boards Manual relating to merging the Conservation Commission and Pest Management Committee. And this is coming to us from the Conservation Commission and Pest Management Committee. We also have Assistant Manager Liam Gallagher with us, who I think is going to help step us through it. Or am I?
I'll introduce the item and then Jamie Fitch is available for any questions. The background to this is another proposed change to 302A that's gone through a fairly comprehensive committee review. In short, the extended background here is that the council did task staff with reviewing existing standing committees and propose consolidation where it made sense or was appropriate. And I believe both these committees over the late fall and spring did go through the process of looking at the various charges and believing that this was a consolidation that made sense between the Conservation Commission and the Pest Management Committee. And so essentially it involves rolling the Pest Management Committee charge into the purview of the Conservation Commission so that the work will still get done. It's just removes the what would be duplicative efforts moving forward. So that's the background, but Jamie Fitch has provided some pretty expansive material in your packet for your review and additional thoughts.
Thank you, Liam. Jamie, did you have anything to add? Is she a panelist? She would raise her hand, I think, right? Okay. Yeah. Any members of the public here that would like to speak to this item? Very good. Seeing none, do I have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. We have a hand up. Ms. Breton, you have the floor. You're on mute currently. And we can see you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. And now you're muted again. It looks like we're having audio problems. It doesn't look like your microphone is working.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes.
There you go. Okay, thank you very much for being patient. I am currently co-chair along with Marla Zando of the PMAC committee. And I really wanted to state that I feel this proposed consolidation has been carefully considered and vetted with input from both groups, the town staff and the town attorney. This merger, as mentioned, has been discussed over many months, first within our respective groups, and then by leaders of the two groups in joint meetings. Both Jamie Fitch and Todd Sousa attended those joint meetings, so there was also important and helpful staff participation and input. And as already mentioned, Jamie did an excellent job of revising and updating both the pest management policy and the Conservation Committee charge to make responsibilities and authority limitations clear. And in addition, those revisions were reviewed and thoroughly vetted by our town attorney. I also feel, and I wouldn't be in favor of this merger if I did not feel that the Conservation Committee will be a very committed caretaker and a very strong advocate of the post management policy going forward. And in fact, at their February meeting, members of that committee unanimously voted to affirm support of the policy, with several members commenting that the intent of the vote was to indicate that their desire was to strengthen the policy, not to weaken it. There has also been assurances that Todd Sousa, who has been so very instrumental in bringing solid organic land care practices and equipment in support of the policy, will attend those commission meetings when pest management issues are discussed and decisions need to be made. And as also mentioned before, I really do agree that PMAC and Conservation Commission have very similar commitments to both land and water protection. The policy now applies to roughly maybe 30 acres of town-owned land, but I think it really is intended to be an example for other town residents to follow. And the more people we can convince to reduce or eliminate the use of pesticides, the healthier our soils and watersheds will be. And one final point, I think joining the Conservation Commission, which is more recognizable and visible group in the community, will allow us to further strengthen and improve our community-wide educational outreach efforts around organic lawn care. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other members of the public like to speak? Seeing none, do I have a motion
Second.
and discussion?
Yes.
Counselor Katarina and then Hamel.
Thank you.
Yeah, when I first heard of this, I was opposed to it. And I think I still am at this point. And part of it is because I was on the Conservation Commission before I became a member of the council. And the Conservation Commission was set up by state statute, and it's pretty clear what the parameters are for them. The pest management, I feel, it's two separate missions. There's two separate things going on. One is advisory, and one they actually vote on things to do with pest management. As far as excuse me, my mind just went off on me. As far as the town is concerned, another concern I have, you have to understand, I live on 8 acres of totally pesticide-free land, and if it were my choice, I'd say get rid of all pesticides. However, that being said, I think also if you bury the pesticide management group within conservation, it's gonna lose its identity, so to speak, could get lost, and would lose the ability to drive, I guess, what we should or could be doing in the community. I just think that's two separate missions. I mean, I'll support moving this along for further discussion, but I do want to, I will talk to the counselors, you know, at length about more of my thoughts and send you why I think it's not a good idea, but that's where I'm at right now.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Hamel?
Yeah, this is another one that, you know, was a lot more involved. I mean, I know folks on the committee would agree it was very involved. It appeared in appointments and negotiations for staffing. And we realized that they were also proposing the merger of the committees at the same time. So this one is more complicated because it is guided by state statute, it's commission. So we want to make sure that we're aligned with that. We had a very good series of letters from Phil Saucier in terms of telling us pretty much everything that was recommended we could do, but then it went into a discussion about should we do that? And a lot of the concerns centered around, you know, balancing the two respective roles of conservation and pest management. So I have 5 questions that are, a couple of them are nits, but 1 or 2 are still, you know, comments I'd like to make. And I think this is pretty much ready to go, but you know, I just want to make sure we're aware of them and be certain that what we are agreeing to here is really what the council believes we should do. So I don't know how, and I don't know how you'd like me to handle those.
So, well, if there's questions, we might have people here that can answer them,
Right.
or if you want to handle them between first reading and public hearing with staff, I think that's totally in bounds as well.
So we've actually handled them with staff before. So this is really it's ready now for the council to decide. And I thought I'd run through those and maybe we use the intervening time between now and the next step to, you know, kind of do what we agreed to do with another, you know, with another ordinance. Yeah. Okay. And I know we're freestyling here. So, but those questions I had are as follows. We have a 0 pesticide target. Okay, there is a target now that's referenced in here that says a 0 pesticide target. Now it's in section H under authority, and it says the Conservation Commission shall serve as a pest management advisory committee and shall have the following responsibilities. The third bullet is work with the town manager to keep pesticide use at or near 0 levels. It doesn't say evaluate, it doesn't say study. It says, you've got that target in there, 0 levels, 0 pesticide levels. Now, bear in mind, this does apply, it's supposed to apply exclusively to municipal owned lands. So that leads to my second question. I don't know where the language went, but there was language in here before that was fairly detailed. It's actually in the statute, in the state statute, that says you need to maintain a listing of all municipal owned properties. So it could be assigned to this group, it could be assigned to the Conservation Commission, but Thomas pointed out to me that it actually resides someplace else in the town. We do have something that includes not only municipal lands, but also land trust lands. So I want to make sure we have, that's clear to people, and that is, what we want, or where should it be. There also were 2 other things that I mentioned here, and that is there was shall versus may language throughout. Originally, it was may language in the statute and the state statute, and that was all substituted pretty much with mandatory language, shall not may. So again, I want to make sure that we're comfortable with that. Are we comfortable with all of the revisions that actually give this combined committee more authority? And then finally, this is in the cover memo, but I want to be clear that the committee has made some recommendations on staffing. I don't want the public to be confused that our action today does not substitute for the Appointments and Negotiations Committee's responsibility to propose staffing to the council for approval. This is not part of what we're not approving staffing by approving this measure. Okay, thanks. Sorry but I took the time to write them out, and those are it. So
Thank you.
2 big ones, a couple small ones. Thanks.
Councilor Seiler.
I would just like to clarify something that Councilor Katarina had just said. Mr. Hall, the Pest Management Advisory Committee votes within their committee, but they are still an advisory committee, and ultimately you have final authority over the recommendation that comes out of that.
In fact, the only decision that will come to them is one I bring to them. So I make the decisions in compliance with the policy. If I need to deviate, I need to come make my case and receive their permission, I suppose. So the council really ceded that responsibility to this group. So on a normal basis, I don't go to them and say, we're ready to fertilize, can you give me permission? I only go there if I have to deviate from the policy. And I guess the other background I'll just mention is there was a heated debate at the time this issue came up. It was initially proposed to be an ordinance and potentially apply to private lands as well. The final result was apply to town property only and be a policy, not an ordinance. So important differences.
I will say, as a liaison to these 2 committees, there is a lot of recognition amongst members of the committee that they understand the difference between a policy and that if further changes would require an ordinance. And so there's certainly an understanding among that body that is not what this change would reflect. And I know it's been stated, Jamie did an excellent job preparing and giving background to the council on kind of the long winding road that this has taken. But I think that at this point, questions about authority or the commission's capacity to take on the work of PMAC, it's starting to feel a little bit to me like we're sitting at the dais saying we might know better than they do. And so I would just like everyone to take that into consideration as they consider this.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Councilor Katarina.
Yeah, just as a follow-up, there was a statement in rules and policies that Todd made that was really stuck in my head. And when he was talking about, where this was going, and he said something about, well, they'll have to pay attention, and I'm going to get it wrong, and I apologize if I've got the statement wrong. The essence of it was which chair they're sitting in at a time. And that's what made me think, well, then why are we putting these 2 together? Because PMAC does one set of things and the Conservation Commission does another. And I'm not saying that they're similar, but it still doesn't feel right to me, having served on the Conservation Commission myself, so.
I wonder if it helps, just to put in context, since this policy was put in place in 2011, I don't recall more than 3 times ever going to seek permission to deviate. And so really, in my mind, the purpose of this PMAC committee is education around these ideas. And I think Ms. Breton said it best, is that they're anxious to really, with the help of the Conservation Commission and those folks, is to really excel in the education piece. So I just want you to know, in actual practice, it's very seldom that they're actually acting and voting on a matter that I bring to them.
Thank you. Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Just a real quick comment on that. I mean, and that was my understanding when PMAC was first formed and that brouhaha or whatever that came out of it. I mean, I would love to see PMAC strengthen themselves. Why don't you become stronger? Why don't you become an advocate for pesticides, reducing pesticide use in the community at large, rather than, again, getting buried in the Conservation Commission, which to me is set up by the state to work with zoning issues as related to conservation, as related to whatever. So that's another reason that I'm
With all due, what I've heard tonight and previously, they see this as in fact strengthening their abilities.
So I might add to that. I didn't talk to everybody on pest management, but I spoke to Roger Chabot, and went through this whole thing. How do you feel about it? And he admitted that not that this ordinance change should be a solution for a membership or enough of a critical mass for a committee, but that the issue was they were just frankly unable to have consensuses on a consistent basis. They weren't able to function as a pest management committee. So this, I think in theory, ought to be able to help them to do that. How it's going to work procedurally, I don't really know. I don't really know how they're going to do, but for a while they had been meeting together. So I so, and it was working. So I think that there probably stands a better chance for the combined group to be successful than to lose one of them.
Councilor Katarina.
all I'll say to folks is I'm open to being convinced. I just haven't been convinced yet. So that's all.
I did spend a good amount of time on this one as well, and I was former liaison to the Conservation Commission, and I think we've got an energetic group. They're kind of breathing some new life into the work that the commission can do. I think this merger will help strengthen and solidify what they can do. I've seen in some of the notes that were included in our packet that there's maybe an interest in strengthening the pest management policy. And looking at our comprehensive plan that we recently passed, what we talked about earlier with protecting the marsh over by Sawyer Road, I actually support if there's some critical wetlands that we can further protect. I think that's something that we should entertain, and I don't know that it fits with this charge. It may be an ordinance amendment, but if the committee or commission, can help us with that and bring something forward along those lines, I would be supportive, as I'm supportive of this merger today. With that, Tony, would you call the roll?
Yes. Councilor Snyder,
Yes.
Councilor Anderson,
Yes.
Councilor Paul Johnson,
Yes.
Councilor Katarina,
I'll say no.
Councilor Hamel,
Yes.
Councilor Ken Johnson,
Yes.
and Chairman Clucci.
Yes.
It passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is order number 22-029, act on the request from the fire chief to accept a federal grant in the amount of $437,500 for the Scarborough Fire Department's award of a 2020 FEMA Assistance to Firefighters Grant. And this is coming to us from the fire chief. Tom, are you going to introduce this, or do we have
Fire
chief?
chief unfortunately had to be called away. Liam, I think, is going to introduce this quickly.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Tom. So again, just in brief, this was a large capital expense item that we were going to carry in our budget through the diligent work of the fire chief and his deputy fire chiefs, the retired fire chief and current fire chief and deputy chief Lemoria. They were able to obtain a FEMA grant to the tune of $437,000. I think that's actually going to increase, but it did require a 10% match. The Finance Committee should be prepared to see a capital request in the FY23 budget for that local match and the estimate of approximately $60,000. And this is not a nice to have. This is absolutely an imperative piece of equipment for our firefighters. And hours are due to expire. So again, really diligent work by the fire staff to offset what would otherwise be a bonded local expense of nearly $500,000.
Very good. Any questions for Liam? Any members of the public that would like to comment on this item? And do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And discussion? Counselor Hamel and then Katarina.
Thanks very much. Just one quick comment, and this is a huge win. So, kudos to the folks that located this and were able to pull in that size of a grant that big. It does involve us $39,000 worth of expenses. So, it's not totally free, but it's a good thing. And I think it's well-deserved and will be put to good use, I'm certain. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Katarina.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, good job by the fire department to get us something out of this grant for this. So.
Counselor Anderson.
Yeah, this is great. And when we had our communications committee meeting this week, we talked a lot about how examples like this are really good wins, that we need to recognize the staff more often. This was originally, I think, in our CIP for much more than what's in there. And through their creative opportunity going after this grant, they've helped to get the service that's absolutely needed. Once you read what this is for breathing equipment for our firefighters, that's critical. And the fact that they were able to go get a grant that's going to help taxpayers as well. Those are great things that I hope we bring forward to the public in the budget or can communicate better. Because I think especially in the police and the fire department, they've been doing that a lot lately. And I don't know if that's a relatively new thing that's been happening, but it just seems we've been approving a lot of grants for public safety lately that are and finding these opportunities that are fantastic.
Sure.
So kudos to the staff and all the work they're doing there.
Thank you. Yeah, this is one example of a large item from last year's capital plan. It's only one. There's actually, remember we authorized funding for her park improvements that were deferred. So just because we approve something in the budget, I think it's important for people to remember those don't always happen. They're not required to happen. And staff has, I think, exercised some good discretion in the past with selecting which ones are ready to move forward. So thank you to former chief and chief for bringing this forward. And Tom, good work.
Yes.
Would you call the roll, Tootie?
Counselor Scyther,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Paul Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Ken Johnson,
Yes.
and Chairman Clucci.
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
We don't have any non-action items. Next up is standing and special committee reports and liaison reports. Does anybody have anything to add? Counselor Anderson first.
Sure. So we had the school building committee yesterday that Tom mentioned earlier, which was a great discussion. I know I had reached out trying to find a tour date for the council to go and tour the primary schools. I think we might have to do that later because I think a couple of counselors are going to be out on vacation during that time period. So it might have to move to later in April, May. I know we want to be careful around budget time, but I think we also want to be in the schools and see it in action. So I don't want to do it too far in the summer, but we're really trying to get that tour scheduled. So if you can send me some of your dates and times that might work, I'll send an email out just to check. Yesterday's conversation was really around communication, the how, why, and why now. There was a good document that they put together as part of their packet that I shared with the council that, again, just provides some good history of the decisions that were made, references the studies that they did. Hopefully more of that information will become available. It was a draft, but I think it's a good document just for foundational information that I would encourage everybody to just take the time to read. They're also very actively still working on site selection, so that's kind of their priority right now, and more to come there down the road. When it comes to communications committee, we met this week. We talked more about the Counselor Corner Live format that we're going to be doing on March 31st, that Counselor Johnson and I are going to kind of be the guinea pigs to pilot this new concept of having elected officials have more of a direct conversation with the public on certain topics. This one's going to focus on growth. Again, it's a pilot. We'll see how it goes. We'll learn from it. We might not do it again, So we hope people participate. Otherwise, we'll just be talking with each other the whole time, which would be fun too. But and then again, there was some conversation around potentially doing roundtables again for the budget, which was something that was done pre-COVID. So again, just checking on interest to see if that's something we have the time or commitment to do. I'd be interested to hear from other counselors about this approach, just as another means to get public input through the budget process. But again, we can decide that as a body. The Rec Advisory Board meets tomorrow. Conversations there will be on the turf and track project, as well as getting an update on the Parks and Facilities Master Plan. I believe that kicked off today with the vendor, and that's going to be a process where they're going to evaluate all of our parks and facilities and, you know, give us a good sense of what's happening. And I think Todd's going to be using the Parks and Recs committee as a sounding board from the public to get feedback along the way. And last, the library, they're having an open house Sunday, April 3rd from 2 to 4. So for counselors who haven't been there in a while, you know, they're going to be opening up the entire library to see things, including the boiler that's in the closet next to the server. So I would encourage you, if you have time, to go and do the tour if you haven't done one, or especially the behind the scenes tour, not just the you know, what you typically see as a visitor, but getting really behind the scenes. They have actually been actively working on responses to questions that were raised before, mostly from Chairman Clucci around some of the data. So they really started to dig into the data, and they will have something specifically addressing some of the feedback that you had. So that's moving and on the way. They're moving forward with their community impact campaign to work with you know, reaching out to the public to get support for the project. They've established a campaign executive committee and had the initial cabinet meeting to start recruiting individuals to join that campaign. And their expansion committee is still, the building expansion committee within the library board of trustees is continuing to work with the architect to put together the final architectural plans, elevations, and price estimates in preparation for public meetings going forward. So a lot going on there.
A lot going on. Wow. Councilor Snyder.
So Counselor Anderson and I both sit on the building steering committee as liaisons together. He gave a great update. The one thing I would add to that is that there was discussion last night around developing a communications subcommittee for that committee. And relatively quickly, we looked around the room and it was a lot of elected officials and town and school staff that are currently on that committee, and there is a real need for them to expand that committee to the greater community for volunteers. Superintendent Bruno will be including that in an application, for lack of a better word. I'm not sure what it will look like in the school newsletter, possibly as early as this Friday, but just to kind of give a public voice to that need at the council level. So if you are interested or have specific skills that you think the building steering committee could benefit from, I certainly encourage all members of the community who would be interested in serving on that committee to keep an eye out for outreach to grow their membership.
Thank you.
And then Conservation Commission.
Oh yeah, keep going.
So Conservation Commission, in addition to hoping that first reading would go smoothly tonight, spent a significant amount of time discussing their goals and assigning action items to their goals for 2020. There's a lot of discussion about education and advocacy. And so I anticipate that they will be reaching out to the council for a potential workshop time to discuss with us some of the environmental issues that they see being the forefront for us. So keep a lookout for that.
Excellent. Councilor Katarina.
Yeah, Legislative Policy Committee, we've been busy working on that Housing Commission report, and Mr. Clucci's been involved with it also. And that was the committee report that originally came out and was basically putting the state in charge of zoning and growth management and everything, and taking away home rule. So some major changes were made to the bill. They had a hearing this morning, but I had to work, so I wasn't able to listen to it, but people weighed in from the towns, basically saying a lot of the changes they like, but they're still a little wary of a few things that's kind of like the camel poking its nose under the tent. So I'm not sure what happened today, so stay tuned. Also, I didn't realize, but I got something from Eco Maine, Kevin Roche of Eco Maine, because we weren't even advised on an act to increase waste handling fees, which you would think that places like Eco Maine and whatever be like against. But actually it would make the fees apply to the out-of-state haulers who are dumping in Maine. So I weighed in on that, and most of the people on the legislative policy committee were like, whoa, what is this? Yeah, we need to either support it or look at it more, just don't oppose it, because Maine Municipal came out of the gate opposing it. So, and then long range planning, our meeting's going to be moved from April 1st to April 8th. And we are in the process of trying to decide, what are our first priorities. We've got the spreadsheet we're supposed to be numbering and all this other stuff. So anyway, more will come from that. Mr. Hamill's on that committee with me. So I'll have you do the spreadsheet.
Yeah, so good with those.
I've seen the spreadsheet. It's quite extensive.
Yes, it is.
Any other, Councilor Hamel?
2 updates. We will be meeting tomorrow as an ordinance committee with 3 discussion items. One on marijuana ordinances around caregiver and medical marijuana retail stores. We will also be talking about Chapter 405 utility scale solar ordinance, primarily the forest aspects of that, maintaining forest lands. And then finally, spell binding discussion on corner lot frontage and how that should be calculated. So it gives me a headache just looking at the diagram. So it's spatially challenged. But so that's for tomorrow evening at 4. And then on Tuesday, there's a big Shellfish Conservation Commission meeting. They're going to be talking about this conservation time. And I'm pleased to say that Tody has worked very hard with this committee and also the harbor masters to get everybody back on track with conservation and survey activity. So we have a robust sign up list and process, and that's all ready to go. And at some point, I think we'd be very happy to share that with the council to restore everyone's faith in that activity and our discipline around it. Also, there are several changes that the committee is considering. I don't know how many of these are ready for prime time or how quickly they can be queued up, but they include changes to how the lottery is done, some of the changes to the licenses, and also the possibility of revising the residency requirement for commercial licenses. So these are all, each one of them are pretty big, and kind of, it takes a while to kind of wade into it to understand how the proposed changes will actually, deliver what kind of outcome the commission is seeking. So we'll make sure to try to spread that out so it's digestible for everyone. So that's it.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, I have 3 quick updates. Finance was scheduled to meet yesterday. We did cancel the meeting yesterday. Yeah, we canceled the meeting simply because to allow staff time to finalize the budget. So it didn't make too much sense to put undue tasks on staff when this is the most intense time of the year. So although I'll be in contact with Mr. Hall about the budget, we can all look forward to seeing the unveiling, so to speak, on March 30th together, and then it will be taken to the finance committee. But as far as a meeting beforehand, we didn't want to put some sort of artificial deadline on them, create more work and stress. Secondly, the Downs Liaison. I've been the Downs Liaison since Councilor Clucci's chairmanship. The last, I believe, 2.5 months, I've had a partner in crime every other week. We've suspended those meetings for obvious reasons. The action we took last week essentially sends our consultant and another representative or council leadership at their discretion to perhaps shape a new framework that would come before us doesn't make any sense to add in another moving part to that situation. So Counselor Clucci, Chairman Clucci and I discussed this, and we both agree that the liaison will reapprise its role, perhaps when it is appropriate again, but for the stage that we're in right now, it makes sense to follow strictly what we agreed on last week. And lastly, I'm not the liaison to the Scarborough Land Trust, and I'm going to get this wrong, so I apologize. And Tom, you might be able to help me, but just a shout out, they have a new position they're trying to staff, and I think it's a land acquisition specialist or somebody that will help them look for land. And I've been emailing Jeremy Winterstein and a couple others in the last couple of weeks, and they keep mentioning this position to me. And I'm going to butcher it. Tom, maybe you can help, but I just thought I'd say it publicly. Anybody in the audience, something that might appeal to you, there is an opportunity to look at that position that's open for the Scarborough Land Trust.
Forgive me, I don't recall the exact title. I do have the job announcement and I'll share it out with you.
Yeah.
And perhaps we can do something in our newsletter just to help them out in that regard.
So I guess I'd use this to request, let's throw that in the newsletter because I think it's a good position. And I know they've been looking for the last couple of weeks and they've poked me a couple times. So my guess is that they could benefit from a little bit of publicity. So that's all I have.
Maybe they want you to apply for.
Nope.
Okay, next is council member comments. Any council member comments? Councilor Seither.
The Cumberland County Soil and Water Conservation District is sponsoring a 5K. It's been advertised on our website and in our newsletter. It's called the Urban Runoff 5K. It is April 23rd. They are challenging municipalities who participate to create the largest municipality team. And I am proud to say that Team Seither is bringing 5 representatives to Team Scarborough. So if you are a runner out there, go ahead and join the Scarborough team and come hang out with me and most of my family. The 4-year-old's not going to run.
Just as an aside, we have a plaque downstairs in planning. We have received the Turtle Award for the slow and steady team.
Here we go.
I could join that team. Councilor Anderson.
Yeah, I just want to recognize David for those who don't know, he passed away on February 21st. He was our former harbor master and marine resource officer for nearly 20 years. There's a great spread in the leader on him, and so I just want to send my condolences to the family. And I ask that we just get a quick moment of silence for Mr. Corbo and thank him for all of his service to the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councilor comments? So I don't have something prepared, but I did want to say something. Scarborough is unique and special in a lot of ways, and just something jumped out at me today. You may realize that our high school hockey team won the state championship, right? Well, we don't have a rink. Our boys swim team won the state championship. We don't have a pool. And I believe, and I may miss this because it happened a little while ago, but our indoor track team, I think, won the state championship as well. And we don't have an indoor track. And I think there's something, not that we shouldn't have any of these things, right? I think we should, but there's something to be said for the grit that, having to work for it, having to travel, go off hours to someplace. Yes, we should have all these things in town, but it's not a horrible thing that we don't. We're being hugely successful despite some of our limitations. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm proud. So good job, everybody. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Yes.
Please.
Councilor Seither?
Yes.
Councilor Anderson?
Yes.
Councilor Paul Johnson?
Yes.
Councilor Katarina?
Yes.
Councilor Hamel?
Yes.
Councilor Ken Johnson?
Yes.
And Chairman Clucci?
Yeah.